So this morning I'm just going to show you how to make a lemon meringue pie. It's a lovely dessert for Christmas. So there's 3 different elements to the lemon meringue pie, which is what can make it a little bit challenging to make. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the pastry. So we have some plain flour, which we're going to sieve. We're going to use some icing sugar with the plain flour because the icing sugar doesn't have the granules of a caster sugar. So it just helps to make the pastry that little bit smoother. So we're going to sieve that as well to make sure that there isn't any lumps in it. So you might have to press it down through. The caster sugar tends to take on dampness from the air, so that's why you end up with so many lumps in the likes of caster sugar and bread soda and things. And you're using plain flour so that it doesn't rise. And we're going to use our butter. I'm going to pop that in there and we're going to rub it in until we get what looks like breadcrumbs. It's always good to leave the butter out of the fridge overnight. It just helps to keep it soft. We have a very cold kitchen here, so it stays hard even when you leave it out. Another tip after you've made pastry, it can also help to let it rest in the fridge for maybe 15 or 20 minutes before you roll it out. But if you are doing that, just make sure you don't leave it in the fridge for too long, because when you're using real butter, the pastry tends to get really hard and then it can actually be impossible to roll out after. So just keep your times. So we're using quite a lot of butter here, and that makes the pastry really nice and flaky, like a short crust pastry. Once all your butter is rubbed in, we're going to add in just a little bit of egg yolk. That adds a little bit of richness to the pastry. We're going to use some cold water, and we're going to put in a little squeeze of lemon juice just to give the pastry that lemony flavour that the lemon meringue is going to need. So if you were using this pastry for something else that wasn't a lemon-based tart, I would remove the squeeze of lemon juice in the pastry. Okay, so you've got a nice breadcrumby type consistency. Try and get out any of the big lumps of butter that are left in there. And again, if your butter is too warm, don't be tempted to put it into the microwave or anything to heat it up too much, because if the fat from the butter starts to seep into the flour, you're going to end up with a very soggy and heavy pastry. Okay, so we've got breadcrumby type consistency here, and then we're going to add in 1 egg yolk just to give it a little bit of richness. I'm going to add in a squeeze of lemon juice. Just be careful that you don't add in any pips as well. If you liked the texture of lemon zest, you could add in a little bit of lemon zest into it, but some people don't like the graininess the lemon zest gives it. So your water then is measured by eye. So it's something that you have to keep an eye on. If you start adding it with a fork, it just helps to gauge how much water you need. So add a little bit at a time. When you see it kind of coming together, you know then that you have probably enough water in. So I wouldn't add any more. We'll tip it out onto the table and we'll roll it up into a ball. So I have some extra plain flour here just to dust the table with. You don't want to dust it with too much. I'll just bring it together in a ball. sure you don't leave anything in the bowl. And if you have some on your fingers, you can just dust it with flour. Get it off. So you need to be nice and gentle with this. It's not yeast, so you don't want to be kneading it too hard. Just to very gently bring it together. And if your tin is round, then I would suggest you shape it into a round shape now. If your tin is square, you could try and shape it into a square shape before you start to roll. If you start off rolling with the shape that you want to end up with, it makes it easier and you have less waste at the end of it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little round shape. So we're going to use this tin. So we're going to start round and we're going to keep turning it the same way so that we don't end up sticking it to the table. So we'll keep turning it to the left. You know then that it's not sticking. Keep turning it to the left. And again, if you had 10 or 15 minutes to let it rest before you roll it, it does help with the texture and consistency of it. So anytime you feel any little bit of a stick, just lift it up and put a little bit of flour underneath. So to be gentle with it. So to make sure that it's the right size for your tin, you just put your tin over it, and what you need to make sure is that you have enough for the sides to come up over the lip here. So it needs a little bit more rolling. Okay, and there's two ways you can put it in. You can roll it over your rolling pin and then lift it up and pop it in, or if you're not comfortable doing that, you can just fold it in quarters and then gently place it into your tin. Because this is a disposable tin and it has little holes in it already, we don't need to grease it. But if you were using a Pyrex dish or something like that, you might need a little bit of butter and flour on it just to grease it so that the pastry doesn't stick. So we're going to pop the pastry in, down at the corners. I'll just get you to get baking beans and a little bit of paper. So we're going to blind bake the pastry. And the reason we do this with a quiche or a lemon meringue pie is that you get the pastry to a nice cooked consistency before you add your filling. And that will stop your pastry from getting too soggy and doughy in the bottom. Okay? So once you have it like this, you could again rest it for 10 or 15 minutes if you wanted to. That would avoid shrinkage. But we're going to just trim it. So you just lift it up, and with the back of your knife, not the edgy side, you're just going to trim off the pastry at the sides here. Okay. Get rid of all of these. And I'll just get the beans. So to blind bake your pastry, what we're going to do is we're going to use some greaseproof paper. And then if you have baking beans at home, you can use those, or what you can use is a lot of beans, rice, anything like that. You can't use them for eating afterwards, so if you're using them for this, you're keeping it for blind baking purposes. We're going to fill them in. And what we're going to do is we're going to lift up our paper and we're going to push them into the corners so that the corners of our pastry doesn't collapse in the oven. A little bit more. So you use enough to make sure that your pastry isn't going to fall over. Push them into the corners. And then we're going to pop it into the oven for a few minutes, maybe 5-6 minutes, at 180 degrees. And while that's cooking, we're going to get our lemon curd cooking. So for our lemon curd, we've got a pot. We're going to add in 300 ml of cold water. And we'll always use cold water when we're using corn flour. If you add corn flour to hot water, it'll just go lumpy. So we're going to add sugar. We're going to add 2 egg yolks. Some corn flour. And we're going to add the juice of 2 lemons. So again, we're going to just keep an eye that we don't have any pips in them. If you were under pressure at home and you wanted to make this with a jar of lemon curd, you could, of course. But this recipe uses the whole 3 eggs. So you use 1 egg yolk in your pastry, 2 in your filling, and then the 3 egg whites in your topping. So you've no waste. All your juice. I'm going to pop it in the cooker for a couple of minutes. I'm going to stir it up, make it nice and combined. So you don't need a whisk or anything, just the wooden spoon is fine. And once we put it on the heat, we're just going to let it thicken for a couple of minutes, and then it'll be ready. Can you see here? Turn it over. Now, so we're just going to keep stirring it while this is thickening. You might spot a little pit floating. If you do, we can take those out. You could strain the lemon juice, and that would avoid you getting any pips in your curd. Keep stirring and stirring, and soon you'll see the texture will change. So at the moment it's quite white in colour, and that will go to a more translucent type colour as the corn flour thickens. And then for our final piece, we're going to do a meringue for the top. So with our egg whites, we're going to whisk those until stiff, and then we're going to add in some sugar, and then they'll turn nice and glossy. So just keep stirring, because once the corn flour starts to thicken, it'll start getting stuck to the bottom of the pot. So just stir in nice even strokes. You don't want any air in it. You can see the colour is starting to change slightly. So it's going to lose that milky colour. A couple of options. If you wanted it to be really yellow lemon curd, you could add a couple of drops of yellow food colouring, or you could add in a couple of extra egg yolks. It will all depend on the quality of your eggs as to how yellow it will turn out at the moment. But you can just slightly feel a little bit of resistance on the wooden spoon now, so you know that it's starting to thicken. So it's just one of those things that it's better not to walk away from, because it thickens quite fast when it happens. So just keep stirring and stirring and stirring, and now you can just see that it's just thickening up, so I'm just going to remove it from the heat. You don't actually want it to boil, you just want the corn flour to have thickened up nicely. So it's nice and thick. So it's quite yellow. If you wanted a little bit more yellow, you could add a little bit of food colouring, but I think sometimes that just makes it look, not as homemade. So I'm going to transfer it into the jug, just to cool it down slightly. If we leave it in the pot, it'll just stay hot. So transfer it to the jug. Leave that cool. And then I have my egg whites whisked, so I'll just show you those. I'll check the pastry. So our egg whites are nice and stiff. Okay, so you want them nice and stiff, you want them holding a peak, and at that stage then we're going to add in our sugar and we're going to whisk them for a second or two. You really don't want to have any dirt or oil or grease or anything at all in your bowl or on your whisk when you're whisking egg whites, because it can cause them to flop. So just make sure your utensils are really clean and nice and cold. And the difference then, once you add your sugar, you still have a nice stiff peak, but you also have a little bit of glossiness from the sugar. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. They say you should be able to hold it over your head, and it won't fall out of the bowl. But I don't think I'm going to chance it today. So we'll take out our pastry. And what you're looking for is your pastry to have set. It's still a little bit on the watery side, so I'm actually going to pop it in for another minute. So you want this to be kind of crusty, but now that it's had kind of 5 or 6 minutes in the oven, it's already set, so we can put it back in without the beans, just to crisp it up. We'll stir our curd, cool it down. You don't want to be putting the meringue on top of the curd, it's too hot, otherwise your eggs might. So we'll just keep stirring that for a moment or two. And you could put it into a little bain-marie of cold water, that would help to cool it down faster. Take out our pastry, so it's dried off. So we're ready then to pop in the lemon curd. So you don't want the pastry to have too much colour at this stage, because otherwise it's going to brown too much when we pop in the lemon meringue. So pop in our curd. Nice and smooth. And then you have the option of just piling your meringue on top, or if you want to, you can get a piping bag and you can do some nice designs. So we'll just spoon it on. The meringue will rise slightly in the oven, but it won't really change too much in size. So just make sure that you have enough spread over the top. Spread it generously around the top, and then we're going to pop it back in the oven. And that will take about 15 or 20 minutes, and then it will be nice and golden brown.